Hi, response video to Renetto. This is going to be a long video, I think, because I'm going to let us have this whole argument, and we'll just go through it. But it was pretty entertaining, pretty revealing. Knew it was coming, actually.
All these videos on Vloggerheads about economics and about inheritance, and
yeah, about social order, civilization, the nature of the game, defining the rules of the game. Yeah, all this discussion about the silliness of this talking about rules in a game. I mean, who would be silly enough to think of having rules for a game? I mean, that's just silly.
And literally, some of these ideas are the goofiest ramblings of an insane madman that I've ever...
You know what? Somebody could say that about the goofy, ramblings about this whole adventure of yours. I mean, somebody could write a scenario, about the game being played right here on Vloggerheads. Is this about doing something, or is it just about selling something, or is it just, what exactly is it about? What's the game? But whatever.
I mean, they're wildly fascinating and entertaining, but they're just crazy. I mean, literally crazy ideas.
Yeah, and you're going to prove that they're crazy. Usually crazy is easy to prove, I mean, if I'm walking around, sticking my hand up people's asses and pulling shit out of their colon, it'd be pretty easy to make a logical argument how, well, that's very disruptive and it's not very sanitary, and why would somebody do that? Because it has nothing to do with the nature of human beings. So it'd be really easy to explain why that's crazy behavior. To advocate that workers, people who create productivity, be allowed to keep the value of their productivity and not to be owned by a capital system that recirculates, that retains money by how a last name is spelled. I don't know. That's a little harder argument to prove to be crazy. And then when you look at history, like the Dickens scenario, Tale of Two Cities even, it's not exactly crazy for people to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't like being a slave, I don't like being owned, I think I'd rather go for civilization. I don't like seeing the wealth of our productive labor being wasted by silly people on their 100-foot yachts. I don't like to see pyramids built. I want to see something constructive done with human initiative. That's not, that's a little harder. I'm just saying it's a little harder to prove that crazy than, the guy reaching up into your colon kind of thing.
Everything you have is an inheritance from your family. Everything.
No, it's not really everything, Renetto. Come on. I mean, if I walk out in the street and I get hit by a car and get my leg amputated, I didn't inherit it from my family. Okay? If I go somewhere and I, buy the right woman a drink and I end up with a great wife, I didn't inherit it from my family. I got lucky. I put the money in the right slot machine by accident, not inheritance. We can talk about determinism and all this other crap, but I mean, get real. It's not everything. My family, didn't carry newspapers when it was 11 years old, for 2 cents a paper. My family didn't do a lot of things that I did. It didn't acquire the skills that I retain and I have. I didn't inherit those skills from my family. No, I earned them on the ground underneath a car, or I earned them, in a digging up a sewage pipe. I mean, I earned those skills. Okay, I didn't inherit them. I had to acquire them. They weren't just bestowed on me, from a family.
Your height, your weight, your intelligence, the region in which you were born. To try to spend all this negative energy calling people of privilege names and labeling them as immoral and...
Well, why not? I mean, so you're saying when the revolution happened, when the American colonists were saying, "Oh, the king is a fucking asshole," they really shouldn't have wasted their time with such rhetoric. They should have just been owned by the king. They should have just accepted that that's the way the world works. He's the king and he owns the property, and you're a servant of the king and you'll do as the king says. I mean, come on.
Worse. It's really a lot of energy in the wrong direction, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and your opinion is coming from a certain place, a certain perspective. You know, you're one of the... yeah, there's an old line from some movie, some old Gary Cooper movie or something. The old lady's sitting in a rocking chair, and she said, "It's funny how the bottom people look down on the top people, you know, because the top land has got all the soil is washed off, and the bottom people have all the top soil. See, and it's just kind of funny because the bottom people look down at the people on the top." And, you know, but anyway, I don't know if that has much relevance, but whatever. I mean, you know, let's call a spade a spade. The emperor has, you know, we can call him what he is, you know, a naked bastard.
Can you imagine somebody really hell-bent on giving everybody a level playing field?
Yeah, well, look, it's not ever going to be that way, but striving for fairness, striving for it, we can't achieve it. Yeah, I can't give, somebody's lost their arms and legs, I can't give them back. But we do attempt to make concessions for people who have been unfairly burdened. We try to make up for some of that unfairness. That's it's only logical. Fairness is a good word, Renetto. I know it doesn't mean much to you, but to somebody who's going to analyze the world from some perspective that isn't the bottom land or whatever, the promised land, and sees need for change, you know, fairness is a good frickin' word. It's let's engineer it wherever we can, and if it doesn't, you know, especially when the engineering doesn't require anything at all, nobody has to die, nobody has to do, no one has a burden here except that somebody give up the right to be something they haven't earned being.
And dictating that short people marry tall people, that fat people marry skinny people.
Well, straw man much? Take it. This is essentially, they have some acronym or some word for when people go for the Hitler card, you know, in an argument. But that's essentially where you're going, right? You're going for the Hitler card here. You're just flipping it out. Just like the other guy throws out the commie card, you're throwing out the, oh, you're trying to genetically engineer us now, and you're a master racist, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, well, look, that bogeyman ain't going to bite with anybody with a real brain. So, new line of propaganda, please.
Well, that intelligent people marry not so intelligent people. Can you imagine sending all of our children to the same city when they're born so they can all start off, from the same go line, right?
I can imagine, yes, and trying to structure a world where every child is guaranteed some minimums of a life, okay? That they're maturated with some guarantees, like they have enough food, that they have an education, that they're given real opportunity and a real prospect for being a participant in society, so that they don't go pull the lever on the slot machine and buy the lottery tickets because they see that they can be a player in the game, that they're not closed out of the game.
Right. Can you imagine telling a father he can't purchase a car for his kid because the guy next door, his son had to work?
I can imagine people understanding that nepotism is a personal emotion, that it drives us personally, subjectively, that it's a prejudice. All right, prejudice and preference are the opposite of the same word, aren't they? So yes, we have these prejudices and preferences, and we have socially declared it a good thing, not to allow it to be a driving force in society, not to allow it to implicate how people live. So we've basically said, no, you got to keep your prejudiced in your living room, on your couch or something. You can't really let it into the social order. And the same for our preferences. Yeah, there is a certain limitation. There is a certain, you know, like I said, it can be your desire to do these things, but you have to know better, that your kids aren't better than that kid over there. They really aren't, Renato. You can imagine that they are. You can believe that they are. But philosophically, intellectually, you got to know that that's based on complete bullshit that you just pulled out of your subjective ass. Okay? And that's always going to be the human instinct, is to think their little monster is the best little monster, and to fall into a trap that obvious. You know, it's not, you're not showing yourself to be very, I won't call you crazy, but I'll call you a little bit, a little underdeveloped intellectually if you can't understand that psychology.
For his vehicle. Can you imagine focusing your energy on telling somebody, well, you can't hire a family member at the company that you work at, or the company that you started. You can't hire friends and families, because that's really an inheritance. That's you giving somebody a leg up, instead of, you know, calling some kid in Ethiopia and then, hey, do you...
Yeah, well, isn't that sort of the exaggeration, calling some kid in Ethiopia? He's not going to speak the same language, probably, and he might not have any of the required skills. But to understand that as soon as we allow nepotism to define the playing field, it's the same thing as allowing racism to define the playing field, or some other ism, and it's very unhealthy for a social structure, for a civilization. Civilization is eroded, corroded, it's rusted, it's degraded by that kind of a mechanism, and civilization should strive to do better than that.
I want this job instead. I'm not allowed to hire my friends and family because that's an inheritance. But I can randomly choose from some disenfranchised person in the world. That's what the law... I mean...
Yeah, no, it's not random. Again, and everything I've talked about is defending the dignity of workers, to give them back what they're entitled to. So again, if you want to keep strawmanning the argument into some sort of take the money from the rich and give it to some asshole picking his nose in Alabama, that's your choice, but has nothing to do with my argument.
That literally, it's so upside down. I'm all for...
It's, yeah, well, whatever. Like I said, you can say it's upside down, but you've got to prove it's upside down. I'm arguing that the world you have, the world where you've decided how your name is last name is spelled, decides where you start off in the race of life, that's upside down, that's nonsense, preposterous, silly, that we shouldn't be deciding the fate of human beings based on who they fall out of, and deciding the merit of them, and deciding who gets to point their little finger at somebody else and say, do the bootstrappy thing. You know,
trying to get people who have a lot to spread it around and to spend a lot of time trying to figure out ways to help the disenfranchised.
Yeah, well, look, it's not about helping the disenfranchised, Renato. Again, it's about allowing workers to own the means of production that they are financing, giving them back their surplus that the rich extracted. And that's the way the system works. Capital extracts productivity from workers. It parasitically feeds off their sweat, their work. And you can pretend that there's some other scenario going on here, but that's the scenario. It's highly, the people at the top are highly overpaid, the people at the bottom are highly underpaid, okay, based on the mechanics of the system we've created. You must concede that deprivation, the amount of desperation there are, the amount of people in line for work shouldn't decide the wage, the value of the work. The work has value independent of how many people want the job. But you're pretending that somehow it's the worker's fault that there's too many people in the world, or there's too many people with a certain skill set. And that, to me, that theology, in my opinion, isn't just upside down. It's insidiously insipid and cruel and stupid.
Yelling and screaming at people who have made something of themselves. or who...
Wait a minute, again, yelling and screaming at people who have made something of themselves. I don't think that's what I've done. I'm yelling and screaming about the circumstance of people who have made nothing of themselves, who have done nothing of merit to earn their position in the world. They have been given the trophy and they did not earn the trophy.
Have been given something from their inheritance, have been given an inheritance from their family. And money is focusing on money is the most narrow view of inheritance I've ever heard of in my...
Well, I don't think I'm focusing on money. The bottom line, though, is money is a representation of possession. So it doesn't matter. I mean, you convert one into the other. That's what money does. It converts a house into balloons. It converts anything into anything. So it's just the conversion medium. So that's why we talk in terms of dollars. But yes, I don't see this, Vital Finds has made these silly arguments about you're just going to destroy the business if the family can't. No. How many companies have owned this tobacco company? I mean, the companies are bought and sold every day. So yeah, you sell a company, somebody buys it, somebody runs it. Hearst newspaper isn't run by Hearst anymore, or a Hearstite. So come on, get real.
Life. If my kids are raised in a neighborhood where 94% of all of the children in my neighborhood go on to college, that's worth more. Giving.
Yeah, well, exactly. Now, and who's saying you can't do that? See, now you're already narrowing the argument to some other straw man that doesn't exist. I already said you could have it. You give the damn kid $1 million head start, but that's not enough for you. You want to give him more and more and more. And so you've just said it. This is the most important thing, that you get to raise your children in this safe environment. They've already had this huge advantage, this huge privilege, a gigantic privilege. They're not growing up in motherfucking Harlem, okay? And on top of that, that's not enough for you, though. You want even fucking more for them. You want to give them, that's not enough of a fucking head start. You want to give them even more of a head start. So you'll sit there and whine at me about my rhetoric when you're sitting there defending. You're not only saying, I don't have any obligation to that fucking kid who's being raised by heroin addicts, okay, and crackheads, okay. I'm not only going to have a huge advantage by educating my kid and letting him grow up in a civilized environment, I'm also insisting that he get another 10 million head start. I mean, god damn, that's just so fucking disgusting. I mean, you talk about, what's the word? Gross? Yeah, you talk about gross. I mean, that's grotesque.
My children the inheritance of good character, of maybe a stable family home life. People that are...
But isn't the irony is that, all these people, these kids of privilege, a lot of them turn out to be major assholes. I mean, I've seen it. I've grown up in these neighborhoods, where they are, and I've worked with them. You talk about shiftless, lazy, conniving fuckers, because they know they have a safety net. They know they're functioning with a net. All right, they're living life with a net. Okay, they're not going to be allowed to crash and hit the stalagmites on the ground there. They're not going to get impaled in the eye. All right, where the poor kid who has to earn his way in the world, he's got to worry about every fucking step he takes, because if he falls, there's no fucking net. He hits the hard fucking ground. God, I just can't. You're just so fucking, well, whatever. So darn obnoxious in the way you are trying to restate this argument.
Born into alcoholism, families that struggle with addiction, they're disenfranchised. That's an inheritance. It's a negative one, but it is one. I believe that character, focusing...
And wouldn't you try to do something about that? You would try to have some sort of social instruments that would allow a kid who's growing up in a home where they're getting molested or something to prevent that from happening. And if their parents are alcoholics, we have systems in place that say, well, there's a point in time where we're going to take that kid away and try to find a better home for it. We're going to try to do something to mitigate against that damage. We don't just throw up our hands and say, oh, well, that's the way it is.
On building character, not trying to take from the rich to give to the poor. That is a no-win proposition. It has never worked. It has always caused more animosity. It's caused people then to start...
we're just going right back to the, it's been tried and done before. And no, it hasn't. We've never even had the instruments to do it before in terms of being able to control how money flowed. Obviously, the rich years ago could hide money all over the place. They could hire private armies. They could do all kinds of things to retain their power and control. But yes, as civilizations have progressed, they've been able to fine-tune this thing called civilization. And you don't need a Lenin or a Stalin or any of that other crap or the Ding Ping Chings or any of this other shit. You can do an open source system. You don't need a tyrannical government to impose civilization on us. We can have civilization through very open source mechanisms, rules that are right there in the front of the building. When you walk in, they'll be right there spelled out. No secret anything. Come on. Okay, this is going to be part huge, and then we'll have part huge afterwards.